just to explain what's going on, or shall I just let you take over and you run with it?
You can just do a brief introduction.
Okay.
Whatever it occurs to you to say.
It will be brief. So, okay. I'm going to hit record and I shall start letting people in.
Okay.
Here we go. Just letting people in at the moment if you wonder what I'm doing and why I'm not looking at you all. And we're just going to keep everybody on mute for now so that we don't have a background noise. How are we doing? Look at all your lovely faces. Have you got your pads and pen and paper ready? Hopefully you all got the link to the slides that Lonny's going to be using today. If you haven't picked it up, it's in an email. It's either that or it's on Facebook. Okay. And just while we're waiting for everyone to turn up, just letting you know that we are recording this. So you have been warned. Okay, so I'm going to carry on monitoring the waiting room and letting people in as and when they turn up. I'm going to hand you over to Lonny. He's sitting ready and waiting the other side of the rather enormous pond. And I just wanted to say, I know we would all want to say a huge thank you to him for taking the time, spending with us today, and inspiring us and pushing us all forward. So I'm going to hand you over to Lonny, and I shall be monitoring the. If you need to drop in and drop out, then I shall be keeping an eye on the waiting room. Have fun, everybody. Speak to you soon.
Well, hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thanks for coming today. This is a great opportunity. Jen has been, I've known Jen, we've never met in person, but she's been using my book in the schools for years. And we've talked for years about doing some kind of collaboration. And of course, we were going to do that, I think, a year ago, and the whole thing went south with a worldwide pandemic. So it's really nice to be here today. I'm going to create some context for understanding blocks, and we'll talk about it. Well, I'll mention all of them, but we'll talk about a few in particular and go a little bit in depth. And you're welcome to just put questions in the chat area that Jennifer will monitor, and she'll ask me when there's an opening, and I'll try to leave about 20 minutes at the end. And you're free to ask me then any questions on anything I presented or anything relative to do with Chinese medicine at all. Just to say my background, is, I'm about to turn 63. When I was 17, I wrote my college entrance essay on the difference between Chinese medicine and Western medicine and Chinese and Western culture. That was about 1975. And in 1980, I took my first course in Chinese medicine, a 10-week course with a graduate of the Worsley School, who both he and his father had become 5-element acupuncturists, studying with Worsley in the school in Oxford. And I worked in JR's clinic for a month in 1985 as part of my schooling. And when I was in school, I met a physician named Leon Hammer, who wrote Dragon Rises, Red Bird Flies, and now about 7 other books on Chinese medicine. And I studied pulse diagnosis and apprenticed with Leon for 10 years. And I've done my own research and my own work. I've been in full-time practice for 36 years, done about 90,000 plus clinical sessions. And I'm just releasing a new book, my 3rd book, called Deepening Perspectives on Chinese Medicine, which looks at Chinese medicine as the art and science of catalyzing human emergence. I'm looking at Chinese medicine from a developmental perspective in this new text. So that's just a little bit of background. And Jen asked me today to just talk about blocks in general. So I think we understand. I mean, my understanding is that most people here have a rooting in the 5-element tradition of J.R. Worsley. I actually, the school that I went, the clinic I worked in with JR for a month was the one in Leamington Spa, down by the old, there was sort of like a huge parking lot, like an industrial park in the back, I remember. So anyway, when we talk about the teachings of J.R. Worsley, typically it's known as the 5-element tradition, or Worsley 5-element acupuncture. And what's interesting is, if you consider it, is the only part of the tradition that actually has to do with the 5 elements is how they use those 65 element points. And everything else in the tradition, in terms of clearing blocks, none of the blocks are 5 elements, right? They're not 5-element based. The clearing all the blocks that we talk about today, and conception and governor vessel, and many of the other aspects of the tradition aren't actually rooted in the 5 elements. The only thing rooted in the 5 elements in that tradition are the way that tradition frames using the 65 element points. So it is actually an eclectic tradition that JR put together as his own synthesis, studying Chinese medicine over decades. And one of the things I think is quite brilliant in the tradition is how JR put these different blocks together that he learned from different people in different places at different times throughout his clinical career. And we can understand treating these blocks and clearing these blocks. You know, I've been teaching for 35 years now, and I've taught students from most of the acupuncture schools in the Western world, and many schools. I have actually have a fair number of students who grew up in China and learned Chinese medicine in medical schools in mainland China, and then immigrated to the West. And the thing that strikes me is the brilliance of treating these blocks, clearing the therapeutic field, creating a stability of balance so that the whole channel system, everyone is talking to each other in the interior collective of the self, and that there's open communication before diving deep into constitutional lifelong treatment. And the blocks are brilliant at the outset of treatment to clear the therapeutic field, to create a foundation of stability for ongoing depth treatment. And they're also brilliant whenever trauma, internal or external trauma, arises during the course of ongoing treatment. So if a person breaks their leg skiing or is in a car crash or falls off a bicycle, or gets, experiences some life trauma like a death or a divorce or violence of some sort, these blocks are just absolutely brilliant in helping restore the authentic self, helping restore agency, clearing the field of what is not self to strengthen the presence of what is self. So there are two basic things we can do in Chinese medicine. I mean, the one basic thing, fundamentally, all we can do in Chinese medicine is diagnose how yin and yang are coming apart, and we can promote the communication and interpenetration of yin and yang. And we can do this through two mechanisms. We can strengthen the presence of what's real, the zhong qi, the upright qi, the authentic, the zhen qi, the true qi, the authentic qi. We can strengthen the presence of the primordial influences within the self, the jing, the qi, the shen, the upright influences that correspond to original nature. And we can help eliminate everything that isn't true self, everything that is not congruent with everything that is burden and blocking communication. And when we make a statement and we say something like, Chinese medicine promotes the flow of qi, we have to understand that that is sort of a somatic thermodynamic level explanation that actually promoting the flow of qi is congruent with empowering communication between different parts of the self. And promoting the flow of qi is a metaphor for helping the individual cease repression, stop repression, to help them face what needs to be faced that they've been tucking away. So when we talk about promoting flow, we're talking about promoting communication between consciousness and the unconscious. And all of these blocks are actually physiological metaphors for strengthening the upright and eliminating all the influences within an individual that have been internalized that correspond to repression and denial of life experience that was too traumatic, too painful to face, as well as the rules and the roles that have been programmed into us when we're very young that are unquestioned, that we don't even know how we got them, but we just believe in them. So when we're very young, we're taught, you're a boy, you're a girl, this is how a good girl acts, this is how a good boy acts, this is what's expected of a mother, a daughter, a lover, a sister, a brother, this is what a good Jew does, this is what a good Christian does. All these rules and roles are programmed inside. And they create separation. The unexamined rules and roles create separation on the inside. And these blocks help strengthen the upright, the true self, so that it emerges in a person's awareness as light in the interior. And on the outside, we want to just help drain to the exterior and help the person see through and eliminate everything internalized that does not correspond to true self. So we may understand that Chinese physiology is a language that is multidimensional, and every word in Chinese physiology, qi and damp and blood and wind and cold and heat and joy and longing and grief and fear and dryness and cold, every one of the, and phlegm, blood stagnation, qi stagnation, every one of these words simultaneously has representation in the physical self, the mental self, the soul, and spirit simultaneously. The language of Chinese medicine is always a psychophysiological language that leaves, for the holistic and integral practitioner, no dimension of the patient behind, no significant dimension of the patient. So we can talk about the gross realm, and the gross realm is the body and the dimensions and the physical world, waking life, where everything has a name and everything is apparently separate. And the gross realm refers to the body, and it refers to those aspects of the human mind that reveal to us a parent's individuality and separation in the world of things. And then we have the subtle realm, and the subtle realm is the psyche, and then beyond that, the soul. That's dream time, dreaming. So in waking life, a cup is a cup, and a spoon is a spoon, and a chair is a chair. But in your dreams, a cup, a spoon, or a chair are just the tip of an iceberg with metaphorical meanings throughout your life and throughout potentially all your incarnations. So every apparent thing that appears in a dream is actually a metaphor for all kinds of repressed and unseen emotional, psychological, and soul level content. So while everything in waking life appears to be concrete and real, in dreams, everything is fluid and elastic. And just as our dreams deconstruct our waking life into a flow of symbols, beyond dreaming, there's deepest sleep. And deepest sleep is the causal, it's the realm of spirit. So I might clear white light, and I might ask you, in your deepest dreamless sleep, where are your dreams? Where are you in your deepest sleep? And that's the realm of spirit, because there's no such thing as your spirit. We can talk in Chinese medicine about spirit or Shen or self, large S or small s. Shen, small s, is your persona, the contents of your mind, your memories stored as thought, feeling, emotion, and sensation. Shen, large S, is the one unbroken field, the one unbroken self, the one unbroken spirit that recognizes no separation, that's infinite, clear white light. And what we experience as a spiritual experience is, in most to all instances, a temporary porousness or breakdown of the ego-imposed boundaries between Shen small s and Shen large s. Now, most people only know themselves as their biographical self, with the mind that orients them in time and space to their name. And the Tao Te Ching tells us in the first line, that which can be named is not the eternal name. That the self that can be named is not the eternal self. That the self small s is not the same as the self large s. So from the biggest possible perspectives, every one of these blocks helps restore communication in a way that ceases repression, so that Shen spirit self large s can make itself known to the individual and begin to form a magnificent, ever expansive, limitless context for the individual to begin interpreting their personal life experience in. So most people are, through genetic basis and cultural reinforcement, only know themselves as Shen small s. They only know themselves as their biographical self. I was born on such and such a date to these people at this place at this time, and I have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years of life experience, and that's me. And when something infinite like consciousness is constrained by something finite, the general experience is of living in an inherently limited, suffocating context where personal wounds and traumas take up most of one's metabolic energy and experience and are repressed to a significant degree, or the person spends their entire life trying to heal from what's happened. But from the perspective of spirit, Shen, we're already whole, and we can define spirit actually as the dimension of the self that doesn't need healing, because nothing ever happened there, nothing is happening there, nothing ever will happen there. And the taxi's waiting, the engine's running, it's at the curb, and it's ready to go. And it doesn't need more time to fully live. Doesn't need more time to fully live. So all of these blocks play a very important role in helping to restore agency and shift attention off of the inherently limited personal self-sense so that more compelling and significant dimensions of who and what we are that are transpersonal can enter into our awareness as dimensions and parts of ourself. In other words, I think it's a universal experience of practitioners that when we treat a patient for possession, aggressive energy, husband-wife imbalance, entry-exit blocks, Akabani imbalances, people gain more objectivity on their experience and experience more room and more objectivity and more perspective between their concerns and their pain and their suffering, so that they can it becomes increasingly an object in their awareness. So a person comes in with aggressive energy and everything is right here and it's very, very intense. And we've all seen the transformation where we leave those needles in for 20, 30, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, however long it takes. And when we're done, the person's face is relaxed. They're able to talk about things from a relatively less victimized point of view. And they're actually able to reframe and more open to reframing and thinking differently and more creatively around their experience, which just half an hour or 45 minutes ago consumed all of their awareness and defined their entire reality. So with treating possession, we're eliminating what is not self and we're helping to restore agency. There's two kinds of possession. There's goo. This is supposed to be let me type in Chinese. Let's try that again. Doesn't want to let me type in Chinese. Okay, well, we have goo, which is worms and bugs like hepatitis C, malaria, COVID, Lyme disease. We have goo and we have gwei. Gwei is what the Worsley possession treatment treats. It's ghosts. Goo is physical. Whenever a person is goo, you can take that and look at it under a microscope and see it. It's a bacteria or a virus, and it has size and mass and exists in time. And with gwei, ghosts, that doesn't have size and mass. And acupuncture treats gwei better, and herbs treat goo better. So we have these two kinds of possession. And treating possession and treating aggressive energy. Aggressive energy is Worsley's term for Jie Qi, evil Qi. And right here you can see the tooth of a demon, the tooth of a demon that is possessing an individual. So this means evil Qi, and draining aggressive energy and treating possession correspond to getting rid of what is not true self, venting it to the exterior so that true self is not repressed, and that consciousness can now embrace a more whole view of the self rather than being constrained by the presence of something which is not real. Treating the husband-wife imbalance is a physiological metaphor for ceasing repression so that yin and yang can communicate with each other. The entry-exit blocks are all about getting qi to go in to circulate in the Chinese clock. And qi not circulating always means repression. That's all it means. It means repression when qi doesn't circulate. You can you can fall off your bike and get a hematoma, and that blood is not moving, and the blood that is not moving and is hardening causes qi to flow in an agitated way around the blood, which causes choppiness. That agitation shows up on the pulse as choppy. Now, there's not necessarily psychological repression involved with falling off your bike and getting a hematoma. So there's external genesis of all of these blocks and internal genesis of all of these blocks. Every one of these blocks you can get from a physical trauma, or it can arise internally due to ignorance and misplacement of one's attention. And the Akabani imbalances are about promoting the flow of qi left to right in the meridians. So all of these blocks have to do with getting rid of something that is preventing communication and restoring healthy communication. They're all metaphors for ceasing repression. So the first thing we're going to talk about is draining aggressive energy. Normally, when I teach this class, it's about when I teach it to my 2-year course, it's about a day to a day and a half. So we're doing this in an hour. So we're taking a hop, skip, and a jump through all of this. And I'm trying to hit the headlines here. So we know that I think probably accurately that everyone here has been taught how to drain aggressive energy. So we drain aggressive energy at the shoe points. Let me clear that. Okay, we drain aggressive energies at the shoe points, and here is the character for shoe point. And the character shoe point is for a canoe that's crossing a river. Here on the right, we have a river. So here we have a roof, a moon, but together they mean canoe, and here's a river. So the shoe points are known as transport points because they help transport us from one shore to the next. And what's interesting, if we take the character for the shoe point, and why are they called transport points? Because they're transporting yang energy via the needling the bladder meridian to the surface, to the organ, right? So the thing is that bladder and kidney are the water element. Now, when we think about elements in yin and yang officials, the element is just one thing, and there's a deep note that moves very slow, and there's a very high note that moves very fast. And the deeper and slower we call the yin official, and the higher and faster we call the yang official. But they're just one thing. So the deep note in water is Jing, and Jing has a reserve of qi and yang in it. And so the transport points transport qi and yang from the Jing to the heart protector, the lungs, the liver, the gallbladder, the stomach, the spleen, the bladder, the kidney, the diaphragm, and so forth. And we can also use these points to transport pernicious qi, evil qi, qi that is corrupt and does not correspond to the authentic self, to the true motive for having incarnated in this life. We can use it to transport that to the surface for the sake of draining. If we take the character for transport and put it over the character for the human heart, we get the Chinese character for to heal, which is interesting that the character for transport, point, shu point, and yu point are etymologically related to each other. So we're transporting the heart to the distant shore. When we talk about upright qi, zheng qi, we have heaven and earth. Those two lines are the Chinese number 2. So here we have heaven above, earth below, and the character zheng qi for upright qi means to go from one shore to the next without stopping halfway. So when we needle a shu point, we're giving a person a access to a deep reserve of qi and yang to help them make it to the distant shore. And if we look at the Bodhisattva vow from Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva vow states, may I be the doctor and the medicine, a leader for those who journey, a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the distant shore. So in Theravada Buddhism, the Buddhist Buddhism, everybody was just leaving culture and going to a cave in the mountain to get enlightened. And in fact, I'm going to try desperately here to see if I can type in Chinese again. And I can't. So curious. I've always been able to before. No problem. So the character for an enlightened individual in Chuangzi is a picture of a human next to the picture for a mountain. And it means someone who's left culture to go to the mountains and become enlightened. That was personal enlightenment. And Mahayana Buddhism comes in 700 years later with the Bodhisattva vow. And the premise of the Bodhisattva vow is, for all who take it, I didn't have to come back, but I consciously made the choice to come back and endure whatever suffering I needed to endure in this life for the privilege of being able to awaken other human beings and take them to the distant shore. So it's interesting to contemplate that it's fairly simple to become a doctor. Anyone of average intelligence can become a doctor. To become a doctor, you just have to learn technique and knowledge and pass a test. And most reasonably intelligent people who can memorize can do that. But to contemplate what does it take to actually become the medicine? Well, what it actually takes to give our lives so that we become the medicine prior to putting a needle in anyone, prior to opening our mouths, that our attention is not constrained to the limited, inherently limited, suffering, wounded, traumatized part of ourselves. We have been freed from it. It's not that it doesn't comprise a dimension of who we are. It's just, it's not the most compelling dimension. And it's not the place that gets the most significant amount of our attention or identification. We know ourselves instead of this force of upright chi moving from the base of the spine up to GV20, the seventh chakra. We become the force of transformation to go from the first chakra to the seventh, to go all the way to the distant shore. We can understand aggressive energy as chi inside that has become corrupted, that reflects only the fears and desires of the separate self sense, the ego, or has come into us from the outside as toxicity and toxic chi that we have gotten through exposure to something outside of, to unwholesome influences outside of us. So the Ling Shu in chapter 51 does not use this character Shu for the Shu points. Rather, it uses this character Jiao, which is the character from 3 heater. It uses the character for 3 heater for bladder 13, 15, 17, 18, and 20, and 23. And it talks about them as the burning space Shu points. And it talks about their use for draining pathological heat. We can understand aggressive energy as being a pathological form of chi that either gets in from the outside, wind, cold, and damp. So when wind, cold, and damp arise from the outside and get stuck in the meridians, the body, of course, uses its chi and its yang to try to push those to the exterior. And if we don't have enough chi and yang to push them to the exterior, there arises an internal conflict between the healthy force of our chi inside and the unhealthy, pernicious chi that has gotten into the surface of our vessels from the outside. And that can just persist for years and, frankly, decades. And our consciousness can be subsumed to that conflict so that we see ourselves in conflict with and victims of the exterior world, so that we experience that forces outside of me are trying to get into me, and I am a victim of what everybody else is thinking, saying, and doing. So what was external now becomes partially internal and consumes our resources. We become a victim and we project that onto relationships with others as victimization. So a person with aggressive energy tends to be cynical, bitter, sarcastic, indignant, resentful. And this is one of the main ways of diagnosing aggressive energy in a person. We can feel it on the pulse as a tightness in the surface of the pulse and potentially indicating inflammation and pain somewhere in the body, usually corresponding to the organs where aggressive energy is present. And we can also feel it as a vibration in the surface of the pulse, a tightness, heat, inflammation, and vibration. So again, this can arise externally from an external pathogen or just from a deep, morbid infatuation with our emotions, where consciousness becomes entrained onto anger, resentment, fear, bitterness, judgment, trauma, wounding, victimization. And our wound in life, our suffering, becomes a force that all of our awareness is just entrained into and sucked into, so that our wound becomes like Gollum in the Lord of the Rings, our wound becomes our precious. And complain about it though we might, we're afraid to let go of it because it's the largest source of our self-identification. So draining aggressive energy creates on a continuum from a temporary to hopefully a long-lasting clarity, so we can back off from looking at our wounds, our traumas, and our negative experiences that we've had in life, both inside in relationship to painful and repressed emotional states and memories, and outside in terms of life events that have come in and gotten trapped in our interior that are not self, but we hold on to them consciously or unconsciously, stubbornly, refusingly to let go of them. By draining aggressive energy, we can create enough space so that we now feel some freedom in the face of this. And then a good practitioner can lead us to understand all the ways in which we've been thinking about our experience in the wrong way, hypnotized by what is false, wrong, and untrue. So this is just a picture. I've had that poster has been up in my room since 1980. 41 years. It's the nice vintage patina on it now. It fell off the wall and the glass broke so many times I just stopped replacing the glass. Maybe I should get some plastic which won't break. Anyway, I don't have to teach you. This is really a slide that I use when I'm teaching TCM practitioners how to drain aggressive energy. And I don't think I need to explain much. This might look like the points are uneven here, but it's really just because after I put the needles in, she shifted her whole body and the right side of her body went north. Anyway, you can see the very heavy aggressive energy response, and you can see that on the test needle, there's almost no red about it. I stopped putting test needles in between every set of points 35 years ago. But I generally will do one test needle. Anyway, so, that's a typical reaction and you've all seen it. I just included this because I don't know where everyone is in their training, and maybe there are some students who haven't learned this yet or are just learning it and maybe haven't seen a strong aggressive energy reaction. So this is not the strongest I've ever seen. I have seen reactions where the red was all congruent and about 2 to 3 times as large as this, but this is nice because the circles are discrete. And I have seen them where the red was much darker, reddish to reddish purple, almost what you would get when you did gua sha with people, when you did scraping or cupping, for instance. Are there any questions on aggressive energy that or anything I've said up to this point? This is a good time for me to entertain a few questions.
There's just one that went on the chat, Lonny. Somebody was asking when you were doing the discussion about IDs and EDs, whether have EDs and you talk about vaccines and whether EDs might be useful or necessary post-COVID vaccine. Obviously, a very topical question.
Well, practically speaking, it's useful whenever we diagnose the kind of signs that indicate possession. So I wouldn't just go and do possession for everyone who gets a vaccine. Frankly, I would think doing the aggressive energy treatment would more be something that I would routinely consider for something like that. Possession to me has that unique hallmark of a real break in eye contact. The eyes, I rate possession on a scale of 1 to 5, and at 5, the eyes are like black holes and there's no light escaping, there's no Shen escaping. And there's, when we ask ourselves what is possession, well, that depends on the culture, the level of stage of development of the individual and the culture of the person that's having it done. And if you're from a tribe in a jungle somewhere, or you live in the mountains of Haiti, possession is ancestral spirits or some demon. And if you are, a mythic membership in any of the traditions, possession is just the devil. And if you're a scientific rationalist, possession is just disordered neurochemicals. And if you're a postmodern person, possession is just a cultural construct. And from an integral point of view, possession really is just influence. It's just a misplaced of attention onto dimensions of the self that aren't real. Just getting lost, sucked into, and morbidly infatuated with a very small part of who and what we are, so that one's affect becomes more or less monochromatic. So if somebody who's possessed, you don't see them healthfully cycling through the seasons of all the emotions coming and going. And they tend to be just sucked into fear, or sucked into rage, or sucked into lust, or sucked into consumption, or sucked into grief. And you see this monochromatic kind of presentation in them, rather than going around, healthfully going around the wheel in relationship to whatever we're talking about during the diagnostic interaction. So anyway, to be honest, I think draining aggressive energy after getting vaccines in general would be a better intervention.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, because what's happening is you're introducing something that is other into the exterior, and the body can, this immune response people get in relationship to the vaccines, where they get exhausted and the body has this full-blown immunological response. Well, if you look at that on the pulse and in the tongue and in their symptoms, what's happening is heat is rising and people are getting chills and fever are typical symptomatology. Well, that chills and fever, their body's yang is rising to push out the cold, and it can't, so it's trapped halfway into the interior, half inside and half outside, which is Xiaoyang, gallbladder 3 heater, which is the hinge between the exterior and the interior. So you have this 3 heater thing where you're running hot and cold. And draining aggressive energy will help get the cold and the pathological heat out to the exterior, to help overcome that immunological response. And I am quite sure that won't compromise the effectiveness of the vaccine in any way. The herb formula for this is minor baplurum, Xiao Chai Hutang, which treats the Xiaoyang stage of the progression of heat from exterior to interior, really we should say the progression of cold from exterior to interior in an individual.
There were a couple of other questions. I'm just going to apologize really quickly, Lonny, because for some reason we've been having some rather strange technical issues with the recording. Everyone, we can hear you. They're all having to pin your video, but I'm not sure in the final video who's going to be up on the screen. It seems to be picking one person and filming them. So if anybody can't see Lonny regularly, please pin his video top right, three white buttons. Okay, I'll explain it later. There were a couple of really quick questions. I think they all rolled together about AE. We've been asked, somebody's asking how frequently you find AE. They have been told by a practitioner that it's very, very infrequent. So how common is it? My experience is fairly common, but be interested to know what you say. And also, how long is the longest AE drain that you've done? How long can it take to clear?
Sure. So when I got out of school and I started in my own clinical practice, as my clinical experience impressed itself upon me and I paid it attention to it, I stopped doing everything I was taught that didn't bear out in the clinic and continued doing everything I taught that yielded practical results and made sense to me according to my own clinical experience. And just to answer that question, draining aggressive energy is still to this day, 36 years later, the first treatment I give 99.9% of all my patients. I find some degree of aggressive energy fairly regularly. And even in the people that I don't, I find the treatment is beneficial. It establishes a nice balance between all the internal organs. It gives the person the opportunity for a treatment that's reasonably painless so I can gauge their needle response. It's at you know, at the least that it does is nearly everyone I give it to finds it pleasant and deeply relaxing. I find even when aggressive energy doesn't drain, it creates an overall nice balance on the pulse. And I'd say I get a reaction like the one in this slide, 2 in 10 people, 2 in 10 people. And the rest of them, it's just a great, hello, how are you? Sort of like racking up the balls in a pool game to just establish, a nice basis. It's like that break shot in a pool game to just see how everything lies. So I've always continued with it, and I think it's an absolutely brilliant treatment, and I just feel good doing it as the first treatment in everybody who comes in. The longest one I've ever done has been about 2.5 hours. So I have 4 treatment rooms in my clinic, and that's going to be rough on you if you only have one treatment room and you schedule a patient at 10 o'clock and then another patient at 10:45 or 11, because you really don't want to take the needles out halfway. It's like telling a person to get off, you're giving a person surgery and you're halfway through, and then you have to sew them back up and tell them to come back in next week, and you'll start the whole thing over because you don't have time to finish it. So once started, you really want to finish it with this proviso. I don't treat people with AIDS anymore significantly, and the reason for that is, 15 years or so, 20 years or so ago, they came up with this cocktail that very effectively treats it. But I started treating patients in 1985, exactly when AIDS broke. So when I started treating people September, October 1985 in Worsley's clinic, I guess October. And we were all using Chinese needles that we'd autoclave and reuse. That was October. And by January, we all went to disposable needles because in that 3 months, the AIDS crisis had broke. And we got rid of the autoclaves, and we've all used only single-use needle since. And I opened a free clinic for anyone who tested positive for HIV. And for 5 years would treat anyone for free with HIV and advertise that in the newspaper. So I had a lot of experience doing it. And I had a lot of experience taking their pulses. And in people with HIV, and similarly in people with any chronic degenerative illness, like Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, people very sick with multiple sclerosis, cancer, you have to be very careful about doing long, aggressive energy drains, because it may be that the only chi they have is Jie Qi at this point. They literally have no reserve left. When you have a patient with deep, feeble, absent pulses that are just like but you have to push no chi depth, no blood depth, no organ depth. Now, the pulses, as you learn them, when you go to the Worsley pulse system, when you do gallbladder and liver, what you're calling liver is just the top half of the chi depth. And beneath that is a whole blood depth, and beneath that is a whole organ depth. So you're just really in the very top part of the pulse. And when I'm talking about a deep pulse, I'm talking about you feel nothing in what you're calling the yang organ. You feel nothing in the yin organ. There's nothing. And you press deeper and there's nothing. And you press deeper and there's nothing. And you have to get fairly deep into the wrist until you would actually say that's the gallbladder pulse. But what you're actually doing with patients is going down to the deep organ depth of the pulse, and wherever you feel first feel the pulse, you're saying, oh, that's the yang organ. And when you go a little deeper, you're saying that's the yin organ. So if you get a patient where you have to push unusually deep to feel anything, and you would give this person a -3 in both depths, they don't have much qi and yang left. And if it's just vibrating down there and a little thin and thready and very buzzy, if you drain aggressive energy, it'll drain for 3 hours because it's all they have, but you really can't do that in a person who's so debilitated. You might just drain them 10 or 15 minutes at the beginning of each treatment for quite a long time while you're doing moxa or whatever else you're doing to try to tonify and build some healthy chi in there. Anyway, that's that. Any other question?
No, that was great. That was fascinating. That was really interesting. Well, it's all interesting, but that was fascinating. It was only very slight ones. A couple of people were struggling to hear, but I think that's just their connections maybe. One question was, which some of us were taught that you only put the needle into clear heart last, or you put the needle into clear on heart only if you find on pericardium, or do you just routinely include heart in because you have it in that pattern there, you just routinely include heart? They're just the different trains of thought.
I was taught the second, which was to only drain the heart if you find it in pericardium. But that didn't bear out in my clinical experience, and I just started doing it. So I've always just done all the points. And I wouldn't argue with anyone who does it anyway. And JR, understand that JR changed things every day. And every time some practitioner came back from England, we'd all want to download, what's he doing now? Where's liver 14 today? Where's spleen 6 today? What's the formula for treating possession today? And if you talk to people who trained in 1972, 1978, 1982, 1985, 1990, 1995, and 2000, and ask them how to treat possession, they'll all give you different protocols. And so that's fair enough. Everybody's allowed to evolve, but you're allowed to evolve too, and there are no acupuncture police. So when you, at least not in the United States. So when you get out of school, you just you pay attention and let your impressions in clinical practice inform what you're doing.
Yeah.
There are some practitioners who will practice 40 years, and 40 years later, they will be doing exactly what they learned on their last day of class in school. The point of any school is to give you a sound basis so you can go out and practice safely. But I would tell you, look, I've been studying Chinese medicine very seriously for 42 years. And I feel that after those 90,000 clinical sessions and all the work I've done, I now have a very solid basis for learning Chinese medicine. It's infinite and it's endless. And what Chinese medicine is the study of the human condition in relationship to the universe.
Is it interesting? That is pretty much what we teach, which is lovely, Lonny. And we do say the same thing to the students, that we teach you how to be safe, and how to think, but then you need to go away and think it out, think through it for yourself. And we did the same thing. We were taught not to
have such a good relationship.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you know, certain interpretations which are like fundamentalist.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to try. We were definitely taught not to clear AE on heart, as you found it on pericardium, but in clinical practice, both Jules and I separately, and other practitioners we know, just found that sometimes you do find it on one without the other. So, you know, we routinely test it. But as you say, it's,
that was exactly my experience, Jennifer, which is why I just started saying I should just put it in from the beginning. And if they don't have it on heart, no harm done. Look, it would be very different to go tonify or sedate the heart shoe point, sticking the needle in 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch and getting chi. But you're tapping it in 1 millimeter here. You're just saying, hello, heart. If there's anything you need to unburden yourself from, here's an invitation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. But somebody did ask, actually, I think they're referring to the very levels of depletion on the pulses, if you would consider doing a Ren-Do block at that point when you're talking about pulses depleted to that level. This is a question from one of the students.
That depends on how much aggressive energy is there. If there's a lot of so the answer is that the classic pulse for Ren-Do block is a deep, feeble, absent pulse. But if it's buzzing away and you think there's tons of aggressive energy there, then probably you wouldn't want to promote that kind of communication until you've cleared the AE.
Brilliant. We're at the end of...
We have to learn to think contextually. And our Western minds all very much want the what do I do in this case and in that case. And what we really have to learn is how to be completely flexible and always respond in a profoundly context sensitive way. It's important, you know, Sun Tzu in The Art of War says the enlightened general never utilizes tactics that gain victory in one confrontation, but always assesses the exigent circumstances on the battlefield and responds completely spontaneously to what's here right now. And it's important to understand all medicine has its time, its place, its dose, and its person. And medicine that will free a person at one moment in life will create stagnation and regression and illness at another moment in life. So no formulas.
No, I think the kind of standard answer we give the students is the answer is yes, unless it's not. Which means basically exactly that you know, you just can't say for sure. You have to learn to think.
Right, exactly. Practitioners ask me, do I have any hard and fast rules in clinical practice? Because, you know, especially 5-element practitioners who are dismayed when they see me breaking protocol. And I say, I have one hard and fast rule that I adhere to in every circumstance, and that's do the right thing. You know, we strive to do the right thing right here and right now. And we want to be humble. So in the beginning of our practice, we're going to adhere to what our teachers taught us, because that's what's going to be what's safe. But as we gain clinical experience, in relationship to our own life experience, our life and our clinical experience will reveal to ourselves things that are unique, so we can create our own synthesis. I don't want my students to follow me. What I want them to do is become as inspired as I am and as creative, and I want them to create their own Chinese medicine. Every real doctor of Chinese medicine practices their own Chinese medicine.
Just trying to work out what that sound is.
It was my phone.
Oh, that's no, that's fine then. Just keeping on. Yes, I think the students will be quite heartened by that, because it is that whole thing. Those that you can see might nod at this. Is that whole thing that when you're learning something, you want certainty, and what is quite disorientating about this is that we can't give you certainty. We can't
Yeah,
say
if
this is how it
anyone,
is.
if you want certainty, it would be better to become an accountant.
I like that.
Anyway,
I'll remember that one.
so we can move on here. I'd like to talk about the entry-exit points. And by the way, I've got plenty of time, so no constraint here in time. I'm just gratified to be here. And I usually am happy to talk till the last person in the room leaves, and then I shut out the lights and go home. So Neijing Suwen, chapter 13, the court physician says the utmost principle in medicine lies with oneness. And Huang Di, the Yellow Emperor, says, what is that oneness? And the court physician says, there is oneness, and therefore one gets it. And the character for get is to obtain, and the character for obtain is da, as in duchi. Duchi is when the needle grabs the chi. And Huang Di says, how? And Chibo says, close the doors and shut the windows. Tie yourself to the patient. Repeatedly inquire about their feelings. Adapt your treatment to their sentiments. If one obtains the spirit, the patient will prosper. If the spirit is lost, the patient perishes. Huang Di says, good. So this metaphor of closing the doors and shutting the windows is a metaphor for taking attention off the outside world. The doors and the windows are the sensory orifices. The windows of the sky points, for instance, allude to opening the windows so a person can, and eliminating all that occludes the accurate perception of reality, so that there is a connection between the interior of the self and the exterior of the self, so that they are one and authentic and true. So closing the doors and shutting the windows is a very typical Taoist cultivational metaphor for meditation, for closing the sensory orifices so that light can emerge in the interior of the self and that spirit can reveal itself. So here Chibo is telling us to get our attention off of our own fears and desires, of our own egos as practitioners, to let go of ourselves for the sake of being able to perceive the actual condition of the patient. So let's consider the number 7 here. There are 7 stars in the Big Dipper, which are the 7 sources of light in heaven. The Big Dipper is the spoon in the sky that stirs us through the Sheng cycle, through our fate. And at the moment of conception, the Big Dipper is the spoon that takes an apportionment of darkness out of the night sky and shines light into it. And that light is the light of personal destiny, our purpose, our spirit for incarnating on earth, so that at the moment of conception, that light is invested in the single cell, the fertilized ovum, and that light, that chi, the chi will do the work, and the yang will bring the light to drive one cell to 2, 2 to 4, to make Ren and Du differentiate out of Chang, to circle the Ren and Du with Daimai so that the self takes place in 3-dimensional space, and then to give us the other 8 extra meridians as the arms and the legs develop, which is how we will walk through the world and act in the world with the hands, to enact that light in the world through both speech and action and movement. And then once we incarnate into the body after birth, so we've incarnated into the single cell in the fetus, and once the fetus is born, that light will, like a coiled serpent, will push its way up the spine from CV1 up through, and GV1 up through GV20. returning back to its origin in the North Star. So there are 7 sources of light in heaven, 7 holes in the head to perceive that light. So the 2 nostrils, the 2 ears, the 2 eyes, and the mouth are 7 holes. There are 7 internal and external pathogens, demons, to obscure the transmission and the reception of light. And interestingly, 7 internal and external dragon points to eliminate the pathology that is obscuring the transmission and reception of light, for the sake of restoring communication between the individual soul internally, the depth of their own self, and the light of the North Star. And in Taoism, the stars in the Big Dipper are called the central administration of human destiny. At the moment of death, your hun, the po goes out the anus. The po represents every issue in life that you would not face and you repressed. And that becomes the fertilizer for your next round of incarnation. While your hun ascends out the top of the liver channel, which is GV20, to return back to the North Star, to report on the quality and degree of light that you cultivated in this lifetime, the amount of virtue that you cultivated in this lifetime. So 7 is the number of the loss and return of original nature. 7 sources of light in heaven, 7 souls and holes in the head, 7 pathogens to obscure light, 7 internal and external needles for treating the internal and the external dragon points, and kidney 7, the return for restoring light back down to the basis of the self. And the next thing we're going to, after entry-exit blocks, we will go through the husband-wife imbalance as the last thing that I'm treating today. So there are 2 kinds of entry-exit blocks. There are the entry-exit blocks between the 6 channels on the head and the 6 channels on the chest. Now, technically, there are entry-exit blocks between gallbladder and liver and heart and small intestine and stomach and spleen. We all understand that. But if you ask 100 experienced practitioners, I think 98 of them will tell you the ones that they do are the ones between the channels on different elements. So the ones that we do really practically most of the time are liver to lung and kidney to pericardium and spleen to heart, and on the head, small intestine to bladder, gallbladder, triple heater to gallbladder, and large intestine to stomach. And we very rarely do the others. And the reason we very rarely do the others is actually the source and the low points are much more effective at promoting communication between officials of the same element type than the entry-exit blocks are. I don't think I've done an entry-exit block between officials on the same element in 25 years. That's my experience. If liver and gallbladder aren't communicating, the low point will work much better than doing the entry-exit point. So if we break these down to the 2 groups of 3 pairs, we have ones on the head and we have ones on the heart. The entry-exit points on the body bring blood through the heart. So if you conceive of liver to lung and spleen to heart and kidney to pericardium, you'll notice all those pathways go through the heart. Blood is that substance that fills us up from the depth of our soul to the edge of our skin and helps us feel comfortable inside of ourselves. Blood is all about ease of being. Ease of being. And all of the herbs like Xiaoyao Wan, Free and Easy Wanderer, every Chinese herbal formula that strengthens the presence of blood is a formula that in one way or another creates ease inside of ourselves, helping us to overcome frustration, increase perspective, and help the wood relax. Think of liver 3 or liver 8 or liver 13 or 14. These are deep calming points. The entry exit points on the head are yang officials, not yin officials. And yang is, whereas the yin officials have to do more with blood, the yang officials have more to do with qi and yang. And they are bringing qi and yang through the mind, whereas the yin officials have more to do with emotional states and feeling. The yang officials have more to do with thoughts and helping thoughts move on. A person can get hypnotized their whole life, victimized by an emotional state, trapped by grief, trapped by anger, trapped by rage, trapped by heartbreak, trapped by sorrow, trapped by fear, and spend their whole life paralyzed and hypnotized by that emotional state. The entry-exit points, the yin entry-exit points help to move that so they can move on. And I do like a 3-hour class just on the entry-exit points. The entry-exit points on the head are for people who are trapped by thoughts. I'm not beautiful. I'm really beautiful. I can't sing. I'm the best. I'm the worst. I'm stupid. I'm slow. I can't dance. I'm the best dancer in the world. Those are, I'm smarter than everyone else. I'm stupider than everyone else. I can't understand. I understand as soon as I start, and there's nothing more I need to know about it. All of those are just thoughts. So the entry-exit points on the chest are more for people stuck in front of an emotion. The entry-exit points on the head are more for people stuck and imprisoned by a thought. So the entry-exit points on the, so if, you know, emotion and thought are not self. The Sheng cycle, Sheng, the birth cycle, is the cycle of samsara, ignorance. It's the conditioned cycle of the spinning wheel with birth in water and death in metal. And it is a cycle of conditioned thought, feeling, emotion, and sensation. Now I'm fearful. Now I'm angry. Now I'm enraged. Now I'm in love. Now I'm heartbroken. Now I'm needy. Now I'm worried. Now I'm grieving. Now I'm longing. Now I'm inspired. And when qi moves outside of us in that cycle, we get seasonal change in weather. And when qi moves inside of us in that cycle, we get thoughts and feelings. And thoughts and feelings, from the perspective of meditation, from the perspective, all Buddhist and Taoist cultivational teaching is spoken of in the language of stepping off that cycle back to the center. So all of those transitions happen around us, and they all become objects in awareness, and we can see that it's all just a conditioned movement. The character Wu Xing, the character Xing, in Buddhism means samskara. And samskara is just repetitive, conditioned, habitual movement from past lives that the soul brings with it into a given incarnation. And the whole point of the teaching is not to become one with the 5 elements. It's to have the 5 elements occur in our awareness so they become objects in our awareness, and we can exercise free will in the face of them. You know how your patients come in now? You all have patients coming in saying, I can't sleep. I have insomnia. I've been really frustrated lately. I just got really angry this week. Well, the sap is rising outside of them. Yang is rising in nature. Liver 14 rises up to the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the internalization of wall. Everything beneath the diaphragm is the unconscious. All the organ functions beneath the diaphragm are unconscious. Everything above the diaphragm is consciousness. What have you got above the diaphragm? You've got the heart, which is the sun, the lungs, which are the moon, and the 7 sensory orifices, which are the stars in the sky. And the moon, the stars, and the sun are Shen, the 3 lights in heaven, their spirit. It's Shen is consciousness. Everything beneath the consciousness is just repression and unconscious and shadow. Base motivations. Base motivations. And those base motivations are the first 3 chakras. And the first chakra is survival. The second is sex and reproduction. And the third is power. And the unfaced nature of any distortions we carry with us into higher stages of development appear as shadow that prevent the healthy consolidation of those higher stages. So you get all these spiritual teachers that can transmit light and their hearts wide open, sure. And you have these great spiritual experiences with them, but they're corrupted by power, they're corrupted by lust for money, and they're corrupted by sexual issues, or even just accumulating wealth, which is just first chakra. It's just means of production and money. So money, sex, power for the first 3. So the entry-exit blocks are all about opening the orifice of the heart, opening the intellectual orifices of the mind so they can be as one. So there is this, on page 80 of Nourishing Destiny, we have this chart. And you can see out of the Tao comes heaven and earth. The Chang Chi, which is the same character as Chang Mai, it means the same thing. This Chi arises, this whirling abyss of Chi between heaven and earth so they can remain as one. And the Tao Te Ching and Chuang Tzu and the Taoist can say these 3 things, Tao, heaven, and earth, remain forever as one in a chaotic state of unity beyond human comprehension. And then earth and heaven come together as the mother's blood and the father's jing to fertilize the ovum. And then we have the single cell, and out of the single cell arise heaven and earth. And earth arises as kidney yin, heaven arises as kidney yang, and Ming Men, gate of destiny, brings them together. The Shen rises out of the Jing as the sun rises out of the ocean. Consciousness ascends out of the unconscious. And the function of Ming Men is to regulate the interpenetration of yin and yang, Shen and Jing, interior and exterior, because with the first cry, with the first breath, the Zhang Qi, the ancestral Qi, rushes to CV17, whose inner name is primordial child. It's all the ancestral Qi, which is commensurate with the incarnation of the soul into this new round of incarnation, accumulates at CV17 and governs and synchronizes the rhythm of the heart with the rhythm of the heart protector and lungs, which is why CV17 is a reunion point of heart, heart protector, and lungs. And with the first breath, we start getting information through our mouth, our nose, our eyes, and our ears. So the function of Ming Men is to regulate the interpenetration of Jing and Shen, yin and yang, interior and exterior. And all Chinese medicine can diagnose is how yin and yang are coming apart. And all we can do therapeutically is put them back together. We put them back together by increasing the presence of what's true, good, and beautiful within an individual, which is their Jing, their Qi, and their Shen. And eliminating everything that's come from the outside, which isn't real, which is wind, cold, damp, heat, dryness, the 7 pathogens, and all the crap the individual was taught in school. You know, we don't need no education. We don't need no thought control, no dark sarcasm in the classroom, right? Teacher, leave them kids alone. All the rules and roles that were programmed in us. Now, all those rules and roles aren't necessarily bad. It's really good to stop at red lights. It's really good to look both ways before you chase your ball into the street. There are certain things we were taught when we were young that are just part of the basic social contract that are necessary for culture to exist. But there's a lot that we were taught about who we are. You know, we were basically taught because you have these kind of genitals, you're a boy and you're a girl. And this is what a good boy does, and this is what a good girl does. And, you know, and in some cultures we were taught because this is the color of your skin, these are the kind of jobs you can have. And these are your life expectations. Or in India, because you were born into this caste, this is what your life is going to look like. So all those rules and roles have to be questioned. So we have a life purpose that emerges within as light at the moment of conception and as breath from Tao. And then we have socialization, and some of that socialization is good, and some of it is nonsense. We can understand the entry-exit points as promoting communication between the channels by moving stuck chi, but understand that all that stuck chi and all that stuck blood that the entry-exit points move correspond to emotions, thoughts, feelings, and sensations that stop communication. And stopping communication always means repression and the cessation of evolution and development. So from a certain point of view, the way that JR's tradition was taught and assimilated by people in the 1960s and 70s who were all in that postmodern generation, it was all about medicine, was all doing all of this was all about feeling good about who you are and where you're at. Feeling good about who you are and where you're already at. In the first generation in history that actually valued introspection. Now you can say, well, but didn't the authors of the Neijing Suwen and the Buddhist and Taoist Dharma introspect? And I would say, of course they did, but they represented the most advanced human beings in existence at the time they lived and foreshadowed the evolution of the capacity to introspect in humanity. And that actually it was the postmodern generation in the West in the 1960s and 70s actually began to be able to introspect as a whole generation, not just as the most educated and rarefied individuals. Anybody on this call in their 50s probably knows that their grandparents couldn't introspect. Not in the way we do. If I asked my grandmother, if I walked to my grandmother and said, "Grandma, what's wrong?" she'd just say nothing and stir the soup faster. So the liver lung entry exit block is about the relationship between aspiration and inspiration. Liver 14 is aspiration, lung 1 is inspiration. Aspiration is liver yang rising inside of you. It's your own life force aspiring toward higher states and stages of development. It's yang rising inside of you. And so the function of liver 13 and 14, chapter gate and gate of hope, is to help relax the diaphragm so that the life force can carry with it content out of the unconsciousness into your awareness so that you can make it all the way to the distant shore, which is the light in heaven outside of you that inspires you, that shiny object in the sky of the moon, star, and the sun, which is lung one. Our inspiration is outside of us. That's lung one. Our aspiration is inside of us. When our inspiration is gotten through respiration, and I'm breathing in Taoist and Buddhist cultivational texts, they say, inhale the light from the moon, the stars, and the sun. And the light from the moon and the stars, the character Shen for spirit depicts the moon, the stars, and the sun. Kidney to pericardium is the relationship between fear and intimacy, trust and betrayal. The relationship between spleen and heart, spleen 21 and heart 1, is the capacity to be nourished by the fruits of our labor. The circulation of chi begins with heart 1. That's the explosion of light coming out of emptiness, the rocket ship launching off the launching pad. And it goes through 365 degrees of transformation to get to spleen 21, which is the great blow vessel, like the explosion of the fireworks. And the function of spleen 21, the name of spleen 21, Da Bao, the Da just means great, and the character Bao is a picture of a fetus inside the womb. So what we want is for a person to go through their life process to have all their good works coming back to the heart to nourish the heart. The heart is the explosion of light from nothing, and it needs to be fed by all the good works we do in the world. And of course, the pathology of earth is to give, 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 and to exhaust itself giving, and to feel like it does for everyone else, never sets a boundary, and they're just exhausted from giving. So we want to bring that chi and that blood from the spleen so it doesn't hold on to it, and gives it all back to the heart for the sake of nourishing the heart. The small intestine and bladder are the relationship between listening and vision, hearing and seeing, so that we're able to listen to the heart and contemplate the interior. What point, if the top of the liver meridian is GV20, let me ask you this. Here's a quiz, pop quiz. If the top of the liver channel is governor vessel 20, what point is the bottom of the liver channel? Anyone? You can unmute and...
I think everyone's quite scared to unmute, because as soon as we unmute, then we become the one that's stuck in the yellow box indefinitely, which is now going to be me.
That's just because you have a setting selected that does that. There is a way to select that.
Brilliant.
But it's no problem. So what do you think, Jen? What's the bottom of the liver channel?
I don't know. Well, I'd go down to the lower ren, I suppose.
Well, most people would say liver 1. But we will. What is liver 1 looking at?
What is liver 1 looking at?
Yeah. Kidney 1.
Oh, okay.
And kidney 1 are, if GV20 is that singular eye on the top of your head connected to the North Star, non-duality, and the witness. Kidney 1 is that eye on the bottom of the soles of your foot staring into the empty abyss beneath your feet. The capacity to close the sensory orifices and contemplate meditation. When we meditate, we are something contemplating ourselves as nothing. Looking at that, looking as deeply as vision will penetrate into the empty abyss. And as deeply as it penetrates, we feel that allure and that creative pull to just go deeper and deeper and deeper. If anyone's ever scuba dived, you know, you get down to 100 feet, you're not supposed to go deeper because you can get the bends. but you get to 100 feet, 110, 120 feet, and you just feel this, you just want to swim till the oxygen runs out and then just fall and fall and fall and return to the abyss. So kidney 1 is the wood looking deeply, 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 and liver 1 is that light. So kidney 1 is the infinite darkness beneath our feet, and GV20 is that infinite brightness above our head. And the function of the liver channel, the human standing between heaven and earth, is to unite emptiness with luminosity through us so that the two are one. And that's non-duality, being and becoming, freedom from and freedom to. The triple heater and the gallbladder have to do with vision into the horizon. The triple heater is the Great Wall of China, and the gallbladder is standing on that Great Wall, looking into the periphery as far as we can see, outside of us, into the exterior dimension of the self, out into the world. The large intestine and the stomach is about emptiness and fullness. The colon creates emptiness while assimilating minerals. So the minerals go in through the colon wall, and everything that doesn't serve is let go of. Well, what are the minerals in the colon? They're concretized sunlight. Light, what is a diamond? It's light. And what is gold? It's light concretized within the earth. Where does all the gold on earth come from? Does anyone know? All the gold, the only place in the whole universe hot enough for gold atoms to fuse together are inside stars that are dying. So when a star goes supernova and explodes, gold happens, and it flies through space and it hits the earth. All the gold that's ever been found on earth would fill 2 swimming pools. So it's very rare, corresponds to the emperor, the heart, and to light. So the function of the colon is to be able to extract light from emptiness and let go of everything into the void. All the crap we hold on to, all the injustice, all the pain, all the suffering, we need to learn the lesson from it and understand that the suffering we've experienced in life is what has made us human and engendered the compassion and the humility within us to be of use to fulfill the vow we took in coming here and service to others. And we stop trying to heal, and we renounce healing, and we renounce needing to mend the broken heart, because we recognize that we don't need to heal the heart to become whole, that it's the broken heart which makes us whole, because it's what lets the light in and out. Here are the, among other things, the entry-exit points on the head. And this is a chart from another class I teach, so we won't. Do you know that in the Nechings, okay, does everyone knows there's no window of the sky point on wood, on gallbladder channel, right? Isn't that curious? And isn't it curious that the triple heater channel has 2? Do you know why that is? It's because in the Neching Suen, triple heater 17 was on the gallbladder meridian. And it's actually the window of the sky point for the wood. So understand that when TCM was formulated, 5 or 10 or 12 men got in a room and voted. And they said, okay, where are we going to put spleen 6, 3 ACI or 4 ACI? Where are we going to put gallbladder 24 and liver 14? You can find Chinese historic charts that show liver 14 and gallbladder 4 interchanged with each other. So the TCM, in TCM, what we learn as liver 14 is their gallbladder 24. And what we learn as gallbladder 24 is their liver 14. But you can find ancient charts that show it the opposite. They just had to formulate a state standardized medicine, so they just voted. So at some point in history, they just decided triple heater 17, we're going to, I mean, gallbladder, this point on gallbladder, we're just going to put on the triple heater meridian. So that's just an interesting bit of news for you. So I use triple heater 17 is called windscreen. It's the same name of the herbal formula U pingfengsan, Pingfengsan. It's called jade screen formula. This is windscreen. This point is here because it can treat seizures and muscle spasms. And you know, sometimes when you get a wind, you get chills and fever, your eye starts twitching, or Bell's palsy, or a stroke, or a heart attack. All of that can be considered extreme wind. But on a subtle level, you know what wind is? It's rumors. This is for the person who's always, triple heater 17 is for the person who's always complaining about what other people think about them and what they're saying about them. And it's also for the person who gossips, because we know all points work on continuums of excess and deficiency. If a normal heart rate's 74 beats a minute, heart 7 will work for somebody whose pulse is 42 beats a minute, just as well for somebody whose pulse is 110 beats a minute. So this is for the inveterate gossiper, as well as for the person who's really upset because people are saying something about them. And this just helps balance 3 heater as that boundary of wall into the exterior. So the entry-exit block 3 heater, gallbladder to 3 heater is all about vision into the and healthy boundary to the exterior of the self. So this is just another chart. This is from the, this should say filter. When I saved it, it just saved it weird. This is from my new book. I think the new book is far and away the best work I've ever done, and it will be my last significant work in Chinese medicine. I'll probably at some point feel like writing again and do a few articles. But I think I've been writing for publishing for 42 years, and I think I'm done. Anyway, what this shows you is that the stomach meridian, the chi in the stomach meridian is earth and it sinks, and it actually makes a funnel. So the stomach meridian is what I see, what I smell, what I eat and drink, what I hear, and then stomach 8 is thought dwelling, everything I think about my experience, everything I think about what I see, smell, taste, speak, and hear. And that descends in a funnel, collects at stomach 12, the reunion point of all the yang channels, all our life experience gathered through the sensory orifices in the head, gathers at stomach 12, makes it over the clavicle and descends. And just like putting earth in a well, the acquired chi nourishes the manifestation of innate potential in the kidney, so that the essence from the kidney jing can rise up the kidney channel as we create blood and chi through digestion, to be able to introspect and realize the potential in our jing, and then speak and act in the world to manifest the virtues that we were conceived with. And the communication between acquired chi and innate jing is mediated by the mind as a filter. And that filter has a 5-element constitutional tint on it, so that your 5-element type, your constitutional type, what JR called the CF, causative factor is just a poor translation of the Chinese character Xing, which depicts the heart next to the character for birth. And Sun Tzu says, Xing is everything that is present at the moment of conception. It means constitutional. So everything you bring into this life at the moment of conception is constitutional, and each person's constitution has a 5-element color to it. And everyone goes through life looking through a blue, green, red, yellow, or white tinge, thinking that they're seeing life as it is, not realizing the true but very partial nature of the world space that's being revealed to them. The last thing we're going to cover here is kidney 7 and the husband-wife imbalance. And I'm going to do it quickly and then leave about 15 minutes for questions. The husband-wife imbalance has to do with this terminal separation of yin and yang. The person has either had a severe physical trauma or a severe emotional trauma, and they have resigned themselves to a unlivable situation, and it is their consideration that that situation cannot be altered through exercising will. So they resign themselves to it. And the husband-wife imbalance, where the right side of the Sheng cycle is relatively stronger and better in quantity and quality, then the left side indicates that the person's will has collapsed and that the digestive system is working hard to keep them alive, and that they're manifest and they have very little access to inborn reserves of purpose and destiny. They are in a job they hate but can't see their way out of. They are in an intimate relationship they hate but can't see their way out of, and they feel trapped. So the left hand collapses, the right hand overworks, and the person at this stage is highly vulnerable to critical illness, because if they don't have the qi and the yang to face another wound and trauma, so that if they get a severe physical or mental emotional challenge in life, they're at great risk for serious, prolonged and degenerative physical illness and psychological illness, physical or psychological decompensation and or decompensation. This point is called returning current. And you'll notice here we have birth in water, and the qi makes a full round through the cycle. And here we have death in metal, and kidney 7 brings metal into water. Chuang-Tzu says the Tao blows on the 10,000 things so each can be itself. And this is exactly like the image of the sort of mythic membership image of God breathing life into clay. Water is form and metal is breath. You can't find breath, you can't weigh it. I mean, we can, but the Chinese couldn't. So it just stands for the void. So from nothing, the void, comes something, which is this incarnated fetus, through the breath of Tao, the breathing of the abyss into us, and that breath becomes the breath of life. The metal and water brings the qi around the Sheng cycle for another round of incarnation, so it's called returning current. And notice that kidney 7, here we have kidney 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, is where the qi returns in its ascent back up the body. Kidney meridian is the only meridian that does this loop. And this loop around the medial malleolus is the same as this loop around the Sheng cycle. So it's called returning current because the current of yang begins to ascend here. And all of these points are the main points you do for fertility. And kidney 8 and kidney 9. Why do we, after we bring yang to the root and conceive the fetus, then we have building guest. And who is the guest in the building? It's the fetus, the beautiful baby point. To nourish, make the baby beautiful by nourishing kidney yang. All of the points that treat conception are also cultivational points in Taoism that have to do with conceiving and gestating a new self. The entire Taoist canon, all of the imagery relative to awakening, it has to do with returning to the embryonic state, embryonic breathing, through embryonic breath and cultivation, conceiving a spiritual embryo, gestating a spiritual embryo, giving birth to the authentic self, and then how to raise that authentic self and nurture it. It's all pregnancy. All of Taoist cultivational texts are fertility symbolism. There is a book called Transforming the Void. It's very expensive. It's $200, but it's a translation of the Taoist canon on embryonic symbolism in cultivational texts. So here we have hexagram 23 in the I Ching. It's called splitting apart of the door of death. You have 5 yin lines with a yang line, which means you have an empty pulse. There's superficial pounding on the pulse, but it represents the last life force leaving. And when you press on the pulse, it just splits in half and you go all the way down and never comes back. This is like Icarus being proud and flying too close to the sun and then falling into the abyss. It's the door of death because when this yang line changes to a yin line, you have no life left. It's the Chinese clinical definition of death is 6 yin lines. You have form, but nothing transforming, nothing moving, nothing warming, nothing evolving, nothing heating. You just have you have substance you can weigh, but no life force in it. Kidney 17 takes the yang, the pride of flying that led us to fly too close to the sun and inflated the ego, and returns kidney 7 back down to the root. It's hexagram 24, which is called the return. It's the exact same character as returning current. See that character? Hexagram 24 is the same character as kidney 7. And it's called the gate of life. And Chuang-Tzu says that the Tao fills up the pores and fills up the lungs with pure yang and pure light, inspiring us toward heaven. And it's human beings through enculturation and becoming addiction that make one bad decision at a time, treading the path to death. And he says, if the end of your life comes early and you do not manifest your destiny, don't blame heaven. It's the poor choices you made. Kidney 7 brings us to rock bottom. And when we're wounded in life and humiliated and brought to rock bottom, we can get a glimmer of that light and become sober to turn ourselves around, and then cultivate yang one step at a time until we have 6 yang, make amends, work through the 10 commandments and the 12 steps, and rectify the karma we've created and cultivate light one decision at a time till we have 6 yang lines left, and 6 yang lines is heaven. That's the myth of the Taoist and Buddhist light body, where the body disappears and the person just becomes pure light and pure virtue. Here is the triogram for water. 2 yin lines with a yang line between it. The yang line is the father's breath, and the yin line is the mother's blood. The yang line is the father's jing, the yin is the mother's blood. The yang is the father's penis, the yin is the mother's vagina. The yang line, the Tao, is kidney 7, bringing metal into water. Kidney 7, metal in water, is the Taoist picture of conception. You can treat a woman or a man for low sperm count, or a woman for infertility with kidney 7 by building yang. And you can help foster spiritual awakening by returning vision back and inspiration back down to the root. So hexagram 23, when the yang last line goes, we appear yin, which is death. We bring yang line down to the root. We make better, more wholesome choices throughout life, and we get the creative, which is evolution. And here we have Lao Tzu with a peach. What is the stand? What's all the symbolism here? Lao Tzu has transcended, by realizing who he is, he has transformed fear into wisdom. And the marrow has gone up the spine, and therefore he has a large forehead. Kidney jing creates marrow, and marrow creates bone growth, and the bones of the skull have created a large brain, and the brain is marrow, and the large skull and the large brain symbolize the transformation of fear into wisdom. And wisdom means knowledge of the unknown. He's holding a peach because kidney 7, this last long yang line, is the pit of a peach. You can eat the whole peach, and as long as you have the pit, you can replant it at the root and grow a whole other peach tree. So the peach is the symbol of longevity, and he has a gourd, and that gourd is the affinity sign, and that infinity sign is the conception and governor vessel arising out of Chang Mai. Infinite potential, inherently unlimited context. So think of CV1 going up the front to CV24, down to the back to GV1, up the back to GV28, and then back down to CV1. So you have this infinity sign through the self. The two remain as one, and the one is Chang Mai, the undifferentiated infinite ocean of potential. In speaking about, the location of the pass is between, the pass between emptiness, being and becoming, between nothingness and infinite universe, exists between metal and water. And it's this mysterious pass. It's called the Golden Gate, and it's the name of CV1. CV1 is Golden Gate. And that Golden Gate is presided over by Zhi Wang Mu, the Queen Mother, who is the Chinese version of Kali. She presides over the womb and the tomb. And between emptiness, she presides over birth and death. And this gate, the alchemists say it's the heart of heaven and earth. Where is it stored? Yin and yang stimulate it to manifest the sphere of light. The gate of birth and the door of death are immaterial formless passageways. By following the mundane, the yin, one dies. By returning the heavenly yang, one lives. Hence the names gate of birth and door of killing the self. In reality, they are just one opening, but have no location and place. So here's Taoist meditation. The person has extricated themselves from the wheel. They're sitting at the center, and the Taoists talk about spinning the big handle of the Big Dipper, making it go backwards. They say that the common herd go through life like walking corpses, being spun through life like a whirlpool of fate. And through stepping off the wheel, stepping out of the Sheng cycle, back to the center, thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, weather, and all of life become objects in our awareness. And we recognize ourselves now as the void and the light emerging from it, as the central axis of the self. We are bound to illusion through fear and desire. Fear binds the kidneys to the wheel, and desire binds the heart to the wheel. And stepping off the wheel, we become free from fear and desire. There are 7 stars in the Big Dipper, holes in the head, 7 pathogens, 7 steps to losing and returning original nature in Confucius and in the Taoist canon. And kidney 7 is returning current. You can add to that the 7 points for the internal and external dragons. And there are 3 Hun, heaven, human, earth, Jing, Qi, Shen, Qi, blood, organ on the pulse, moon, star, sun. 3 treasures, 3 Jing, Qi, Shen, the movements inside to help us move toward the true, the good, the beautiful in life. And then there are 3 worms. This is the character for Gu, over a basin of blood, 3 worms in the blood to consume Jing, Qi, Shen. Here's the Big Dipper, and the Big Dipper on the solstices and equinoxes make what? The Big Dipper spins around the North Star, and if you look at the position of it in relationship to the North Star and the solstices and equinoxes, you get the swastika, which is why you find this on pottery in South America, Africa, Asia, and Europe, because it was the position of the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper has 7 stars. The middle star is called Tian Shu, heavenly pivot, which is the name of stomach 25. And the other stars have names like Tai Yin and Yang Ming, Xiao Yin. So you have the 6 parameridians, and then the star they pivot around, Tian Shu. That is today's lecture. I'm going to finish just by offering you these books at a discount. Jen has always used Nourishing Destiny as a textbook, and also at times bought Clinical Practice. And it is my apologies to you, though no fault of my own, that shipping has become monstrous everywhere in the world. When I first started shipping Nourishing Destiny I was going to say 1920, but I meant in the 1999 and 2000, I could ship a box of 12 Nourishing Destiny to England for $15. And now it's what, like $270 a box, or 300, I can't remember because I don't do it often. But it's gotten just absolutely ridiculous. And that's because they've eliminated surface shipping, and they don't allow for, I used to be able to put as many books as I could into a bag, and they'd ship the whole bag cheap. There's no cheap surface. Everything has to go airmail. So the shipping now to you is literally something like $68 for a book. And if you buy 2 books, it's like $78. I actually don't charge enough. I lose $5 or $6 every time I ship books there. So to everyone on this call, and Jen, you can let anyone else know in your circle over in England who wants to buy these books, you know, alumni and students, I'll sell you these at these dollar costs, all inclusive. So Nourishing Destiny, $115 a book. That's US dollars, so it'll be less pounds, of course. Clinical Practice, $130. Deepening Perspectives is $130. It is going to go up because this is a pre-press sale. It's going to start shipping in July, first week of July. The way you do this is go on PayPal and PayPal to me which books you want. And you have to put a note when you buy it telling me, Lonnie, this is my name. I will get your email address when you do it. And you say, Lonnie, this is my name, and I want this book and I want that book. PayPal won't know what books you buy. You're just sending me the money. So you have to say, I'm ordering Deepening Perspectives, I'm ordering all 3, or I want just Nourishing Destiny, just Clinical Practice, or I want Deepening Perspectives and Nourishing Destiny, and here's the money. And you send it to me, and you'll save a significant amount of money over even buying it when I send it to distributors, when I send the books to distributors there. So anyway, you can do this for the next 2 weeks, and it's just open to you. You have to PayPal to this address, ACU like acupuncture, TKD stands for Taekwondo, because I did that for 30 years and ran a school for 17. If I tried to do it now, I would wind up in traction. Anyway, acutkd@aol.com. Go on PayPal and pay, and I appreciate it. They have an option called Friends and Family if you have your own account. If you send it friends and family, they won't charge me for it. If you send it without friends and family, they will take out 4 or 5%. So if you can remember to send it friends and family, figure out how to do it, that's great. But if not, I'll still honor this price for 2 weeks from today. Okay?
And did you say as well, Lonny, for them to pop from TAA or put TAA in as well, so that we know, to group it all together for us?
So say I'm ordering these books. You don't have to tell me your name. It will give me that. It will give me your email address. But say this is part of the TAA group order. And I suppose I'll know anyone who buys it on PayPal for this amount would be going to your school. And then I'm going to bulk ship all these books the first week of June to the school. They'll get them in a week or two, and they will send the books out to you. Okay?
We're very grateful, because as I said, you're horrified by the shipping cost. I only looked very recently, but it is monstrous, isn't it? I think it was $79. Yeah, like you said,
yeah,
huge amount.
It's ridiculous. So you're paying about $30, $25 to $31 shipping.
Yeah, I reckon that they're saving probably £35 per book.
Yeah.
Which is, way more in dollars. So no, it's really kind of you to do this, because I know there are so many people that would like to have copies, especially with the new book coming out, and it hasn't been practical. So no, that is fantastic.
A lot of the distributors, I had 3 or 4 in the UK, and they've stopped carrying it just because it's cost so much with the shipping.
Well,
there's nothing I can do about it.
Maybe we should have a big box of them at the college, and we'll quietly post them out for you occasionally.
Yeah, that's fine. Anyway, okay. So the new book is going to be mind-blowing. One of the endorsements is from Ken Wilber, who's written 50 books on transpersonal psychology and human development, and is considered by many to be one of the most significant philosophers alive the last 50 years. And it's 1,032 pages on Chinese medicine and human development. And
it's going to be fantastic. Yeah.
I think it's a very beautiful book. And what I'm doing the rest of the day is looking at the final. I just got the final copy this morning before I sent it to the printing press. So I'm going to take till Monday to look at it and contemplate it. And then it goes in. So
I think
thank you very much.
There was one quick question. It might be a cheeky one, but one of the attendees just said, "Would you be able to sign any of them for us?"
Yeah, I'd be happy to sign them for you, no problem. Also, one other thing to say: check out LonnyJarrett.com. All my courses are there. And by the way, I'm doing my courses now online, so you can stream them. I give a 2-year clinical integration class, which is very, very deep training. And, I've had people fly in from Australia and Greece and England for it, but they're fanatics. And now you can sit at home on your couch and take the course. And I give 2 or 3 weekends a year. I just did a weekend last week to 115 people on the spirit of the herbs. And we went through all the herbal formulas, like the 5 element points. So I looked at what herb and what formula are water and wood, which ones are wood and water, which are fire and water, which are earth and water, which are metal and water. And we did the whole Sheng cycle for 2 days going through. So please, all my courses are always listed at LonnyJarrett.com. Just check in there from time to time, and feel free. You can come online now and study with me. And even though there'll be a 6-hour time difference, it just means you have to stay up till 11 or 12 at night. Plus, I tape all of these things and I put them on. So if you have access for a month to the class afterwards. So
And there's quite a few people in chat just saying thank you very much. They're so grateful, Lonny, and you know, inspirational. Lots of thanks coming through. So I know there's a lot. I know we've all got a lot to think about now.
okay, everybody. Well, I try to create a very
Lonny, I'm going to be very cheeky before. I'm sorry. I just want to ask a question about the EE block.
Yeah.
It's a very cheeky one, but you seem to be perfectly placed to change. Sorry, not the EE block. The house, the HW block, to change its name.
Well,
I find it.
I changed the name of Worsley 5-element acupuncture because I petitioned Judy to take classical out of the name because it isn't classical acupuncture. You can't, I know a fair amount of classical Chinese, and believe me, there's not a word about any of it except for the use of those 60 points in any text written before J.R. Worsley wrote his first book, historically. And just a brief word on what you're saying here, Jill. The husband-wife imbalance is a proper translation of a pattern in Taoist texts. And the idea is that the digestive system is the right hand, and therefore the yin, the woman, because the digestive system's function is to make blood, and the woman should be home cooking. And the right hand is about involution. It's how we take light into ourselves to produce the body, and women produce bodies. And the left half of the cycle is how potential arises from water through wood up to the opening of the heart. And in Buddhism, all Buddhist texts, except for the Buddha's first text, literally begin with the 12 prohibitions about why women can never get enlightened. From the point of view of historic Buddhism, a female body was a parking lot for a soul on the way to a male incarnation. And the left hand of the cycle is light raising out of the vehicle of the body and mind, and it's about yang. And we can understand that from a relatively enlightened point of view, that matriarchy and patriarchy are co-creations of men and women. Patriarchy isn't something men did to women. It's something women facilitated with men every step of the way. And we hardly know what female consciousness and male consciousness are, because they've both been so conditioned by both matriarchy and patriarchy. Understand, things weren't better under matriarchy. The goddess needed endless human sacrifice to ensure an abundant harvest. Things weren't great under matriarchy and patriarchy. What we really want is something that moves beyond the two. So I would be all for changing the name of the husband-wife imbalance, because implicitly what it signifies is that men are yang and women are yin, and it's just nonsense. Obviously, all of life is the interpenetration of yin and yang.
You go for that. Good answer.
So I think we did it. If you're going to order the book, please do it sooner than later, and don't just keep putting it off and then do it 15 and 18 days from now, because I have off the next 2 weeks from teaching. I'm not teaching on the weekends, so it's easier for me to process all of this. So go for it, and I hope to see you all on further teachings. And when we can all travel again, I would love to come back to England and do some live teaching, presumably at the school or at some other venue. Maybe the school could sponsor teaching in London. And
I'm sure we have all sorts of exciting possibilities, Lonny. We'd love to have you. We'd definitely love to have you.
It'll be great. Well, thank you all, everyone, for your engagement. Thank you, Jill, and Thank you, Jennifer, and everyone. I was going to say travel safe, but you're all probably at home.
They're all home. Can I hang on to you for a second, Lonny, once everybody's gone? I literally just want to clear something really quickly with you, just to explain something about the recording. So if we let everybody go, I'll put some dates up on the Facebook page to say the last cutoff for buying books at this level off Lonny. We'll put it on the Facebook page so you know what date we pick,
And
okay?
I'm gonna put one in the order for Sarah Joseph for you. You know,
yes, Sarah? Sarah. Yes, she wanted one, didn't she? I'll email the link to Sarah.
No, she's bought it already.
Oh, she's bought it. Okay.
There'll be one extra of my new book in the box, and that's for her.
That's fine
because it'll be signed to her.
Brilliant. No, that's lovely. That's fantastic.
Okay. Everyone.
So we're going to say goodbye to you all. If you can log yourselves out, I will see you again very soon at college, conference, wherever you may be. Oh, you're so lovely. Lots of lovely comments.
Oh, good.
We'll see you all soon. We'll be able to read the chat in a minute.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you all.
Oh, it was fantastic. It was really good. Really, really good.
Well, we'll do it again, maybe once a year or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just stop the recording. And I just wanted to explain, once everybody's gone, I just wanted to explain what was going on with the recording then, because it was a bit strange.